And he was kind enough to change another appointment, so we don't want to keep him long here. The volume of bills that have been filed is quite something. And we have, through our contract government affairs firm, has managed to put together a summary. And Rick Zucchini, who is our contract lobbyist, he wasn't able to be on the phone today. The deal I made with Lanier, let's talk about, let Lanier talk some about the sort of the overall process. Why do we have so many bills? What happens next? Something about the, kind of the timeline with this, and really, on some level, how serious to take things, given where we are in the process. And then to really just concentrate on the various Medicaid reform bills. And then, I was at a meeting this week and have had some conversations to learn about some of the other ones, so I can pick up on those later on if you want. So, Lanier, it's all you, buddy.
Alrighty, and I've been in a meeting here in Raleigh, and I stepped out to the background noise. I can't control. I apologize. Hopefully I'm in a nice quiet spot here. There's obviously a lot of activity. I think we're tracking what on that is 30 some different pieces of legislation that could either directly or indirectly have some impact on what we do at Smoky and with the LME NCOs. And the thing about the legislature is anybody can file bills. And the fact that bills get filed do not mean that they're going anywhere. There's some that will, there's some that won't. Probably less than a fourth of bills that are filed make it all the way through the system. And the thing about it is, it's always easier to stop something than it is to get something passed, because if the House passes it and the Senate don't like it, it's done, or if the Senate does and the House doesn't like it, it's done, or if it goes to a committee and the committee chair doesn't like it, and one above his head saying that bill through is done. So a lot of the bills probably track them because they do have an impact, chances are they're going to make it through the whole system, because right now, even though the House and Senate are both controlled by the Republicans, there's substantial differences in philosophies and attitudes on anything between Senate leadership and the House, and thus it's not as likely to end up being successful when legislation has any kind of controversy to it like that. While there's 37 bills we're tracking, obviously the thing that we're watching most closely is the whole issue around Medicaid reform. And there's currently about 4 or 5 bills that have been introduced about Medicaid reform. One by a representative that kind of introduced his own idea that's probably not going to go anywhere. There's a bill that's been introduced by Senator Heiss. That may have potential in the Senate, not likely to get great traction in the House. There's a bill introduced by Senator Berger, who is President Pro Tem, and obviously he can probably get that through the Senate, but once again, not likely with the current attitude in the House. But there are companion bills that could put in on both sides. They currently don't have a whole lot to them, but they're kind of placeholders, because there are dates on which bills have to be introduced. They don't have to be fully intact. You can put in a bill with one line in it that this bill reforms Medicaid, and you got legislation that's through the process, the committee process, and the bill in all the way. But what we see happening right now in the whole Medicaid reform issue is, while the Senate is making a lot of discussion, and Senator Berger and Senator Heiss both are basically saying we would like to go to commercial managed care, meaning commercial companies that do Medicaid managed care, contract and handle them good because it solves all our problems. That's what the perception is. Not really, but that's what the perception is. They've got those bills out there. And then the House, though, wants to do provider-led organizations, ACOs, that over a period of time, probably 4 or 5 years, would be fully at risk and be capitated, just like the LME NCOs are, where they get a monthly payment, they cover all the costs. And so I think that we're going to see final legislation come through. There's providers that are working on it, and I think the draft things they're going to propose. The final legislation is probably going to end up being provider-led, albeit at full risk. Right now, I think the idea is the LME NCOs stay intact, but we have to work cooperatively with the ACOs and figure out how that works. And in doing that, the state would get to the point it wants to, the Senate wants to, the 2018. I don't see that happening. The House has said 2020, so we're figuring it'll be a compromise in 2019, which gives 4 years to try to take the system from what is a fee-for-service system for physical health care and make it a capitated system, as we've had with the LME NCAs now for several years. So they're going to try to do that. I think my guess is that it's going to try to put some trigger in it. If you don't accomplish certain goals by a certain period of time, then we're going to open the doors to the big companies to come in. And the only reason I think they may do that is there is a lack of confidence, I think, in some of the Senate leadership that the providers will actually work to make this happen. And I think because of that, they want some kind of pressure on them. And if it does not happen, they don't want to have to go back to the drawing board and say, now what do we do? They want to have some kind of trigger. So I have a feeling that's going to be something they're going to press for as a part of agreeing to go to provider-led kind of organizations and then states, etc. So if we go that route, if everything stays true for us as it is right now, I anticipate the LME MCOs will stay intact. There's a question about whether or not they're going to put more pressure on to reduce the number of them. Right now, we're seeing the new nature taking its course, a slow process of mergers, and we're down to what now, 9 going on 8, I think. And so it all looks that's the direction we're going to go, and I would give it about an 85% chance that something actually gets passed. I think a lot of folks who are worried about all this and saying just do something so then we know how to react before to go. I think sometime in May we're going to see what kind of legislation they're going to have. And once the public, I expect to move pretty quickly because they want to get this behind them. The governor wants some kind of reform because I think he actually has some idea about some limited expansion of Medicaid in some way. In 2016, and he needs a reform bill passed to be able to say Medicaid sticks and we're supposed to move on. So we'll kind of monitor that. A few other things I'll just mention that I'm paying close attention to is that I think it's, and Brian may want to talk about more of this a little later, but one is the issue of trying to move the basically payment and funding for the alcohol drug abuse treatment centers that we have across the state centers. Where they would be paid by the LME MCOs as opposed to direct appropriation. Similar to the way I guess you pay for some of the beds in the state psychiatric hospitals. My concern, and I think your concern about that, would be exactly how they do that, because part of what you want to do is get the most efficient and cost-effective form of care. And there are times that it is actually very critical and very important. But if they say, well, like they've kind of done with the psych hospital, but we're just going to take the cost about that and pay whatever the cost is, then it takes away any incentive to put people in lesser levels of care because you've got to basically do rate adjustments to pay for those centers anyway. So how they structure the way you pay them and how those centers operate, I think is really important to do in the long term. There's also things going on about when I was secretary, I had requests to transfer unused CON licensed beds from the state facilities to private facilities. And basically, there's some legislation that would make it even easier way to occur. Basically, take the whole CON argument out of it, and if you wanted to develop site beds, or if you're in a rural community and you have acute care beds and you want to convert them to site beds, there's legislation out there that would make it much easier to do, which could have the potential of decreasing the number of psychiatric beds in local communities that are available. But obviously, hospitals have to make a decision: is it cost effective for us to do that? How they would do it? These bills are out there. Don't know what's going to happen with those. That's something else that could impact how you deal with that. And there's a number of other bills. I think I made a list of about 12 or 15 that would directly impact you in some way, and then the rest of the list is things that have some side impact But we're watching them closely, and I think there will be Medicaid reform. How many of these other bills get through, I don't know. Some of them get lumped together, changes be made. But I'm feeling pretty good about the fact, at least by the time this legislature adjourns in July or August, that we're going to know what the future is and what direction we're going. So that's kind of a quick rundown of that. Yeah, I'll be happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Well, with the, our motto has been to, with our effort around Medicaid reform here in the West, our aim has been to try to check all the important boxes, believing that we pretty well understood what were the expectations were going to be, and I'm gonna claim victory on that. I think now once we have seen the legislation, that we have approached a solution that does have all the key elements in it. So we're not far off the mark. Now that being said, I guess it's important to explain kind of some other activity that's been underway, and I think we decided, Lanier, to copy that 2-page outline from the Hospital Association that came out earlier this week for the executive committee, and just try to connect the dots here a little bit. There was a meeting maybe 2-3 weeks ago. I guess we call it kind of the senator meeting, where there was a lot of pressure put on the House of Medicine, shall we call it, to step up to the plate and do something or expect commercial managed care. I guess to put it in a nutshell, the content of the meeting was to really reinforce that position with folks. And to give, I guess at one point it was actually 2 weeks, just kind of crazy, but I think that got extended to the end of this month actually, to come up with a, quote-unquote plan. And, that was at a time when we were, really at the threshold of submitting some language that would kind of reflect how we saw the world, and I guess that effort got superseded by this one. If you look at that 2-page document, there's a lot of similarities there, a lot of consistency with things that we have talked about and things that are important to us and to the system. I mean, not just to us, but to the system. And I'm not sure, if we were talking from the perspective of the larger system, of LME, MCOs, or even the healthcare system, it's legitimately, I don't know what you would argue with. You might wish that all of this wasn't going to happen, but if it is, I think we've been pretty realistic in terms of the policies and kind of decisions that would have to be made and how we'd go about that. So, long-winded way of saying our ideas are being reflected elsewhere, and there's a lot of attention and a lot of energy being put into this. There's a follow-up meeting actually this afternoon, and Rick will be at that and some other folks, and I don't know if that's going to be more window dressing than anything else, but Mark Malloy has been working very closely with both the Hospital Association group and the Medical Society group to kind of move all of this forward. So
I think that Brian, you're exactly right, and I think the efforts that we've had in Western North Carolina in trying to develop legislation, et cetera, does closely mirror what's on that sheet, not everything, a lot of what's on that sheet, and I think the ideas that we've developed to help leading that. I know there continues to be tension between the physicians and the hospitals, which has always been the case about who's going to run these things, who's going to be in control. But I think everyone, after about 3 weeks ago, all the providers, it just might go away and everything will stay the way it is, came to the realization that if we help design this, or they're going to design something that we're going to have to live with it. And so I think that what's on that paper will have a lot of impact on what actually comes out on those legislation that I mentioned earlier. That was kind of one line kind of in legislation that could turn into more dominant sort of thing. Still a lot of issues to be answered, like the LME MCOs operate under a statute that creates them and basically defines them. If you do the ACOs, you got to have a similar kind of decisions made. And we addressed and looked at a lot of that in your efforts with the commission, and hopefully all that will filter into legislation. Again, I fully anticipate it's going to want to have some kind of trigger or pressure to keep this moving forward. I don't think they're going to just accept the provider and say, yeah, we'll do it. They're going to do something. We'll see how that goes.
So that's the 30,000 down to about 10,000 foot lay of the land. You know, the ADATC, I mean, again, if we want to move off of Medicaid for a minute, which, I mean, we can stay there if anybody has any questions. I mean, just as Lanier said, some of these bills are, like the TARP bill, I don't think anybody really saw that one coming. He's a senator from Mecklenburg, and he had some he had some fairly definitive language about further consolidation of the LME MCOs. Kind of came out of nowhere. Well, it came out of somewhere, of course, but let's just, for the sake of this discussion today, say it came out of nowhere. You know, bills like that, I don't think that's really headed anywhere. You know, he's had his chance to kind of sound off on some things.
Well, some bills get introduced just to be able to say,
Yeah.
at home.
Yeah. Right. And then there's others, you know, the term, you know, people use placeholder bills where it's you know, maybe it's 2 sentences, and, you know, that's the stuff that at the end of the day is going to end up being it, except they're just not saying much now, but, you know, they meet the deadline and get it in there. So it's time to pay attention and watch, and, you know, again, we continue our efforts to try to positively guide things. So, and I'm going to be headed back to Raleigh here in a couple of weeks to make the rounds, and we stay in real close touch with Lanier and his folks and Rick, and we've been kind of doing a beginning of the week and end of the week to sort of get, you know, here's what happened this week, and then here's what we ought to do about it kind of approach. And they're just, you know, both of those teams, I can't say enough about, you know, working with them. It's fantastic. I mean, there's no way we could do this, you know, monitor this much going on. So, yeah, I guess, you know, the next thing I would probably go to is the ADATC, and it's there's a Senate and a House bill. It's let's see. Senate Bill 318, House Bill 119. It's essentially, you know, this has been on kind of a slow boil for a couple of years. And a lot of questions about the ADATCs, and it stands for Alcohol and Drug Treatment Centers, and their state-run facilities. I think there are 4 of them across the state, and they tend to deal with, you know, more medically involved, complicated care. Some have, you know, very specialized programs, pregnant women, particular medical issues, that kind of thing. And you know, somehow they came up on somebody's radar screen about, gee, wouldn't it be important for us to look at how those are being operated and whether or not the state should continue to operate them. And they kind of dodged a bullet a couple of years ago with a big reduction. And then there was a study, and we may have shared that, I'm not sure now, we could give it to you if people are curious, that was done that you know, looked at their operations and determined that it would be better for the money that is allocated as part of the state budget to run these facilities to transfer that to the LME MCOs and have a purchase of service arrangement, much like we do with other providers, rather than fund those facilities directly. And that's a very big change, and that would take 4 years for that to occur, and there'd be a gradual shift of those funds. Now, for that to show up in our capitation or funding, there would have to be, and this is what Lanier was, where he was headed with his comments, you'd have to project how much utilization each LME MCO would have of these facilities to know that we had enough money to purchase the care. And the state's ability to do that would be the question, because we have a facility nearby in Black Mountain. We make pretty good use of it. And again, it tends to be for pretty high level folks. And again, so why does the state do this? Well, and whether it's a chicken or egg, it doesn't exist elsewhere. So, if that came first and then the state decided we'll do it and that was second, I'm not sure. But this level of care isn't going to just come out of thin air. There's not a bunch of hospitals lined up to say, oh yeah, well, we'd love to do that. No. So how all this...
You remember, Brian, about 2 years ago, there was legislation that had shut down hire private providers. And I asked the senators, I said, "Ben, what private provider are you going to use?" He said, "Well, I don't know if we'll have to find them. I said, I think you're going to shut it down in 6 weeks, and you don't have any idea who will provide the service." So sometimes it's not well thought out, and there's proposals like that are made.
No, at least we have, this has got a lot of traction. I don't see this one slowing down. At least we've got 4 years to get there. That's a pretty important one. Another one, and then we'll let Lanier go here. Probably the other one that's getting the most attention is where is it? Medicaid County of Origin. This is a really, that's House Bill 684. And we just about, even though it's like a one-page bill, it's got a lot of stuff in it that is pretty important. Well, two main things. I think it looks at a problem that existed a couple of years ago around being able to get services for, most of the stories about this have to do with kids who may have Medicaid from one county, one catchment area of an LME MCO, and then end up in another, or they move and they need service, and there's not a contract in place between the LME MCO and the provider, and the care gets disrupted, or there's problems with payments. Well, in the early days of all of this going into motion, sure, you occasionally hear about those situations. To be honest, I haven't heard of any. And I was at a meeting Tuesday with provider groups from all over the state and our association director, and of all those people in the room, there's only one person there who knew of one case. So this is a solution looking for a problem, apparently. You're kind of messing around with the single case agreement, which is a bad name for it. It's really an out-of-network contract. We really don't have the problem, and the way they were trying to implement that would have had a lot of other inadvertent problems. And then the second part of the bill, so we're trying to get to people to just say, can we hang on a second here and talk about what the problem is you're trying to fix? And then the second part has to do with very significant effect of changing the county of residence of individuals in, the biggest effect would be intermediate care facilities. And there would be some LME MCOs, I think Alliance is the poster child on this. It'd be like a $7.5 million swing for them.
not in a good way.
Ours, I think we net a little bit positive, and again, it's just based on where people live and who gets the money to pay for it, okay? Now, something like that, and then, okay, so then what percentage of that affects their admin? You just can't go do this in a day. All the capitations would have to be redone, they'd have to be recertified. There's other inadvertent problems with too many beds being associated with, certain catchment areas. Again, it just, people believe there's a problem, they want to solve it, but there's so much more to it that isn't understood.
Opposed by the Assessment Directors Association and County Commissioners Association because of ESSA, where the counties pay 50% of the load. It's huge if you have any adult care homes. It's huge.
Well, Lanier, we'll let you go. I'm watching the clock here. Appreciate
All
your
right, thank you very much. Forward to anything we hear, and any questions come up there in the committee meeting, we need to track down to something next.
All right. Sounds good.
All
Talk
right.
to you tomorrow, hopefully.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
Brian, there's a couple others on here I kind of want to highlight, especially since Mandy's here. Maybe she could tell us what the DSS
I went over
director
this same
thinks.
list this morning for 2 hours.
There's one, Senate Bill 496, which has a companion House bill about protecting MHDDSA clients from abuse in group homes. I spoke with Jeannie Duncan at RHA about this at the provider council meeting, and I've read the bill, and I think she's got some very valid concerns about the way it criminalizes a lot of things that have not previously been criminalized. And she thinks the impact is going to be actually that providers will be less inclined to report. Because now when they report, it's not necessarily, it's not going to have a criminal impact on somebody. She thinks it's going to have actually the opposite effect of what it's intended. So I'd be kind of curious to know what the DSS directors think about it.
They're supporting the bill because they have been guardians or custodians in situations where particularly children are seriously injured.
Sure.
But that's good feedback, because there are other bills where we're concerned about the impact on reporting. So I will share that in a general way, not attributed to her.
And
Because,
she'd be happy, I'm sure, to talk with you
Yeah.
about it, yeah.
but that's not, we're still finalizing where we are on a handful of them. Our list is about 3 times as long. And that's good feedback, so thank you.
That position is pretty much universally held by providers. I mean, sure,
That's
they
good to
understand why this would, on the surface, look like a good thing, but in the implementation of it, it's fraught with
I
with
appreciate
problems.
that. I think that's a
So you
good
could find a
point.
bunch of people that wouldn't mind talking about that.
It's a really tough thing for an association of DSS directors to post something that says, how
Yeah.
penalties for failing to report.
Exactly.
That reporting impact is worth noting.
I'm sure there's a way to achieve the goals
I would
without,
agree with you.
by making some changes, so. The other one I just want to make sure everybody was aware of is, and this one may not even be on your list, Mandy, but is the proposal to repeal the CON and COPA laws.
It's on our list.
It is Senate Bill 702. Now the House has a companion bill, but that doesn't go as far as the Senate bill. But there is clearly, this is something that the legislature has wanted to do for a number of years and have not been able to do because of some opposition. I think they think that this is their year. So I think my prediction is that we will see a major change in the CON laws, whether it goes as far as the Senate wants it to go to and actually repeals it. I don't know, but I think we will definitely see a change. And the fear, of course, is that that would have a negative impact in some of the rural areas because the CON is what helps keep hospitals alive in some of the rural areas. So just wanted y'all to know that that was out there. And Brian, did you talk about the claims reporting one?
Yeah, let me go through I went through and marked a bunch of them. And as Lanier said, if people have particular interest in some of these, we can chase down information. But as you can appreciate, it's, you know, we're trying to concentrate on the things that would have a more direct impact. Okay, we talked about, and I'm just gonna start at the top, which looks at the Senate bills, and again, the column to the right, many of these have companion bills in the House. So we talked about the 80 ATCs, that's Senate Bill 318, and there's a companion House bill. The Senate Bill 371, LME MCO claims reporting, and Fred could go on for hours talking about what a redundant, no value added, expensive requirement or system there is in place by the DHHS to kind of reprocess the claims that we send to them after they're already paid. And they do that to collect information, which of course is important. And I know the folks from Western have a real affinity for that because there were, you know, some issues with that at one point. But the way they're going about doing it is archaic and filled with problems, and it needs to change. And I think we have asked nicely so many times that people finally decided, you know what, we're going to take a little different route here and bring some political force to bear, and it has had a very positive impact on the responsiveness of the department, what I can tell you. So, you know, depending on how that progress, the pace of that progress, you know, so like Lanier said, bills can always get pulled, or you can back off on it. But it passed committee, so, you know, it's kind of hanging out there. So that's a good thing. And other than, you know, my description, a bunch of technical stuff with it, but it needs to get fixed, and everybody knows it.
It is the year to get through something that requires change at DHHS.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I just can't believe we still have the same secretary.
Yeah, well, there's always that. All right, we talked about Senate Bill 496, and there's a House bill there, the group home stuff, which again, on the surface seems good in operation. It's out of unintended consequences. The TARP bill, which is really a surprise, not so much, well, you know, he hasn't been a big player in healthcare reform or Medicaid. It just kind of,
Yeah, and it's been referred to rules, and it's dead.
that's where it goes.
That's where they go to die. It's dead.
Yes, House Bill, or Senate Bill
Yeah.
568. Yeah, and
It
that
kind of
really,
came out of nowhere,
Yeah.
really.
you know, and because there was some pretty specific language about LME MCO consolidation in there, it tweaked some people. So, well, okay, House Bill 372, and then we've got all the Medicaid reform bills that I'm not going to take to speak to directly. And we've kind of had that conversation conceptually. Senate Bill 701, you know, what we didn't talk about when we had Lanier is CCNC. And our, you know, ongoing relationship with them and how they factored into, you know, Medicaid/healthcare reform. And, you know, here's a bill that would eliminate their funding. And that's not the first year we've seen something like this. I would add that, for example, in the two-pager that is here somewhere, right? Are we going to hand that out?
Brian, do you think that's like in preparation for trying to move towards Heiss's idea of a more privatized model? And he's trying to defund first and take sort of the power, or, you know, any competitive edge CCNC may have away, and then, you know, because he's also introduced the bill to privatize.
I
I mean, they obviously are a little.
going to reserve my comments on that.
I was just thinking out loud.
You will note in the this two-pager, I guess, which we hand out now, which is what Lanier and I made reference to, the meeting with the senators and the strong request that they come up with something.
We're calling it, just a part, just a this.
No, we're just handing it out.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no mention of CCNC in
She's
here.
saying she did, I'm sorry, I bet you think it's in here. Yes, North Carolina provider is the provider.
I don't got it.
Oh, I did have that. Do you have it in your package?
Okay.
So, where CCNC ends up in any of this, you sort of chart the trajectory of things. They're, not as strongly represented in many of these plans as perhaps they were previously. Let's leave it at that. Noticeably absent from this two-pager. And maybe, probably what we ought to do, just take a minute and read this, and we can talk about that a little bit. Meeting this afternoon at 3 o'clock that's gonna, I guess, have some level of discussion about this in public meeting. Mostly government affairs folks. Well, we have a version of this that's probably about 8 or 9 pages long. Or more detail. Remember looking at some of our earlier drafts, you'll note some similarities there. So, track that very closely. Medicaid transformation, ATC, reform, Medicaid reform, Medicaid county of origin, LME MCO board amendments, House Bill 746. I guess this flew through yesterday, one vote against. This is from the east, and it's related to the consolidation of ECBH and coastal, and provides a little more flexibility in establishing the board, and they're going to go use a board structure much like what Cardinal does, where there's an overarching board, and then I'm not sure what
They're like regional
regional
boards, and
Yeah.
each regional board appoints members to the overall board. And so Cardinal's actual board only has like 13 members or so. It's not very large. And then they have these regional boards that report up to them.
So this provides, I guess, some greater ability for that structure to be used, let's just say. House Bill 758 makes no sense at all. That anybody can tell from folks that I've talked to, and it has nothing to do with people not thinking cultural diversity isn't important. Of course it is. But it's a solution in search of a problem. You know, once again, there are two levels of review that occur. One at a local, kind of MCO level, and then there's the administrative hearing level. This just adds itself in between those two, and their results would still end up going to the administrative hearing phase of this. So what would be added exactly, other than another layer that the value doesn't seem to be very apparent to most folks that I've talked to. Medicaid waiver protections, military families. I didn't have a chance to look at this. I think this is related to the C waiver and maintaining a slot somehow. Someone, moves or is somehow displaced by being in the service. And I think it goes to something like that. I just haven't had time to go and look. I don't know that we've even ever had a situation like that, but I think that's the intent of it. And those are the only ones I have marked. If there are others, again, anybody would like to learn more about or talk about, we can find out.
Maybe there's a couple that aren't on here because they don't really impact us directly, but Fletcher Hartsell's got two bills about health departments. What is y'all's position on those?
They're both,
I think that's on, I think
Is it
it's
on
behind here, yeah.
I think it is, I thought I saw it
Yeah.
too. That's about going to regional authorities.
Mm-hmm.
One of the interesting, I do find it kind of interesting that part of what
Oh,
it
yeah,
says is, we want to make sure we understand it's all county money, but we want to make sure we get a good return on our investment for the county's investment in health. So we basically acknowledge the state doesn't put any money in public health, and our name says we want to measure and make sure counties get a good bang for the buck. That one's come up.
He's been on a
Years
roll
past.
about
Yeah.
this.
He has, and counties can form regional authorities now if that's what they need. I don't think it goes anywhere. But I was glad to see we were one, if there was kind of big one, even aside. That's always the way to build good partnerships. You're with your legal organization.
Okay.
Can I just ask, this is probably not going to law, but what is an act of achieving a better life experience?
I don't know. I wanted to look at it, but I didn't have time.
Oh, now that one, I want to say, and I
I
don't
did
want
look
to,
that one up.
that's the one, isn't it, about,
HB 556.
it
SB
allows you, parents of children, am I right, Tracy? That's one that allows parents of children with disability to set aside money to pay for their adult care and not have it impact their eligibility for public assistance programs or be taxed. It's really not is that the right one?
Yeah, I think that it is. The problem with it is that, shouldn't be sarcastic, but as per usual, they have not consulted the federal regulations
That was clear.
in drafting
That's why we
it.
said you'll have to rewrite the federal law. but-
And there are actually ways. I mean, when I was on the state, I did a lot of work on this with Tara and Charnice Ransom, who used to be the HHS's lobbyist. There are ways for families to do this through setting up either a single premium, there's a pooled trust or other kinds of trusts that you can set up in advance that are specifically designed that the federal regs say will not impact somebody's eligibility for Medicaid. But what families don't like about that is when the individual passes away, if there's any money left over in that trust, it goes back to the state to repay the state for the Medicaid expenditures that have been made.
Why do I have in my head that's an Apodaca bill though? So yeah, so it may go somewhere. It's high in Apodaca. It's not like it's a bad concept. It's just, I don't know how they get around the paperwork laws.
Yeah. Yeah, that's.
I hate to think families think they're getting around it. I mean,
Right, because
Right,
they
and then they
won't,
could be
and then,
hurt, yeah.
well, not only will they be hurt, but they could be prosecuted, so.
Wow, that's even worse.
What is the limit now on what they can say without affecting it?
I don't know, I'd have to look.
I mean, in other words,
Yeah.
is it really affecting that many people?
It's a monthly thing, it's your monthly, you have to have a monthly spend down, and your monthly, balance can't ever go above a certain amount, or then you're not. I mean, it depends on your category.
It's
of
very
aid and-
complicated.
I just was wondering if it's one of those, as Brian calls it, the solution looking for a problem.
There are plenty of those.
Well, do we want to have the welcome and the
We'll
approval
start
of the
off, start
agenda?
off again. Okay. Why don't we do that? Okay, welcome everyone. Need approval of the agenda. Everybody had a chance to look at the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So much.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay. Agenda is approved. Approval of the prior meeting minutes. Everyone had a chance to look at the
Motion to approve.
I sit here, but I'm happy to say, because it looks like.
because it's your
That's
word.
right.
All in
I
favor?
trust you.
All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we've got the legislative update. Okay, Integrated care initiatives.
Well, we talked about a lot of that already. Actually, I don't think there's really anything to add to that.
Can I just say a quick thing? One of the things that we're working on is really trying to not only support specific media around our programs, which could be integrated care programs, but we're really initiating and beginning to work towards developing an approach so that our communication tools, whether it's publications, things will begin being on the website, or any information we produce really supports what they call health activation. And that's really an approach where you're supporting consumers to be the best informed they can about their behavioral health issue, and then understanding that there might be a relationship between their behavioral health issue and physical health, or that they need to address those issues, because many times those issues aren't addressed as they come into our treatment providers. So as we move forward in some of our efforts with communications, that will be a big focus for this year, and we'll really support integrated care initiatives and help the people that we serve have more information on how to ensure that their care is integrated, by giving them some tools and resources to know that, yes, I should be asking my doctor about this and this.
Anything?
We are, the other, I guess I could just mention, there's always going to be energy around this. We've made a very strategic hire of a gentleman, actually from CCNC, from one of their regions, not here local, who will be a great asset to us. And that will be a pretty big message out in the world. I guess a little bit like proud father here, the fact that he was very interested in coming to work for us certainly, I guess, speaks for itself. So I'm very happy about that. And found just out of the blue a woman who's done a tremendous amount of integrated care work in the state of Vermont and is relocated to Asheville. And she has a lifetime of experience, and I'm always kidding her saying that Vermont's about like maybe one or two of our counties. I appreciate the scale's a little different, and I'll tell you another thing that's surprisingly different is the percentage of individuals who are uninsured is very small. Just think how different that makes it. So, certainly lets you do a lot of things that we're hamstrung by here. It would be quite an interesting story to tell from the perspective of the expansion of Medicaid, and just how radically different it is for individuals and having access to care. We'll see about that. So there's always going to be things, this is just a big part of what we're doing, every day, every week, every month. This is what direction we're going.
There's an interesting, it's not exactly related, it's an interesting video earlier this week from an outfit in Europe that was talking about if you look statistically at helping poor folks raise their level out of poverty for one thing and meet their needs, that you actually can decrease the population in that socioeconomic group, because statistically poor folks have, and I forgot the number, I think it was 4 or 5 children each worldwide. I mean, it's not, but that folks on the middle and upper group had 2 children on average each. So if you raise them out of this group, they move over into this group.
Population control.
And if you really, what made me think about it in relation to all this, is think about this Medicaid issue. If you begin to meet their medical needs and begin on the other side to help them find employment, raise their level of poverty, you decrease the numbers, ergo, in the end, you decrease the number that are dependent on the Medicaid. It's kind of, I know it's a circular argument, but it makes sense. But had some good statistics in it. Anyway, over here to there.
I think we do have several items for closed session.
So we're ready for closed session? Okay, closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143, 318, 11A1, in order to prevent disclosure of information that's privileged or confidential pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 122C, 126.1, will not consider a public record within the meaning of Chapter 132 of the General Statutes to consult with attorneys. What you guys? Pursuant to the North Carolina General Statute 143, 318, 11A3, and to discuss a personnel issue pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143, 318, 11A6. Do I have a motion?
So, second.
Sorry.
Okay.
However you want to do it.
All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay.